Hello! So today we're taking a look at the Cessna 172 that comes with all versions of Flight Simulator. This is the Cessna 172 with the Garmin 1000 avionics suite. And the reason for doing it really is I wrote up some instructions for starting the aircraft up just recently, and it's been surprisingly popular actually. The download of that PDF with the instructions has, been far more popular than I imagined it might have been. So it made me realise I've never actually gone back and done a startup guide for starting the Cessna 172 up. So, full disclosure, I'm not a real pilot. So I'm just an aviation enthusiast like anybody else that loves aeroplanes. So what I have learned from reading, from studying the books, from looking at the checklists, and from watching the real pilots do it. So I'm going to walk through and in layman's terms explain what I'm doing and walk you through the instructions that I have written up. Now the advantage of the instructions I have written up is they give you all the keyboard keys to move you around the cockpit easily. So that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to follow my checklist, and I'll put a link to my checklist in the notes of the video. Okay, so let's get going. If we press the end key, so we're inside the airplane, we're cold and dark on the ground. So if you want the airplane to start with everything switched off, what you have to do is choose a parking space for your airplane in the world map screen. Don't start on the runway, yeah? So select a parking spot, and then the airplane will start with everything switched off, and then you get the fun of firing the airplane up and doing all the tests. So I'm going to do most of the tests in the checklist, but not absolutely everything. Okay, so where do we start? We press Control and 5, and that brings us into the middle of the cockpit. So the control keys and numbers I'm going to read out as we move through the airplane are the default views built into the airplane. Just to show you them, I'll press Control 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and we're not going to need all of them. And an F will always bring you back to the middle, to the pilot's eye view. So Control and 5 takes us into the center of the cockpit. And you can see we've got some levers here. We're going to make sure that my controls are in the correct places, that my flap lever is up, my mixture lever is back, my throttle lever is back. Okay, so first things first, check the fuel selector is set to both or center. So this arrow on the floor is the fuel selector. So if you roll the mouse wheel on it, you can flick it to be left, both, or right. If we put it in the middle or center, that means it's going to feed fuel from both wings. So the fuel in the Cessna is held in the wings. Also, we're going to make sure that the fuel shut-off valve is pushed in, which means that the fuel is not shut off. If you pull it, you have shut the fuel off. If we push it, we have opened the fuel valve. Okay, we're going to make sure that the throttle is pulled back or shut off, and that the mixture is pulled back or shut off. Okay. Then we're going to press Control and 1, which takes us over to the pilot's instrument panel. And we're going to go and test the standby battery. So we're going to flick it down or hold it down on test, and you can see the test light lights up. Now the proper instructions say to hold this for 20 seconds. What you're really checking is the veracity of the standby battery. So if we let go of that, we're not going to bother holding it on. It's a computer, it's a simulation, we know it's going to be fine. But we can flick it up and it will stay up, armed, and the G1000 on the primary side, on the pilot side, will power up using the standby battery. Okay, so the initial thing you're going to check straight away on the primary flight display are the voltage numbers. So you're looking for the volts to be higher than 24, and they are. You're looking for the M volts to be less than 0 or 0, and they are. And you're looking for the bus E amps, so this side, the amps to be less than 0. That means this is drawing 5 amps of power from the battery, essentially. Okay, so that all checks out, so we're looking good. We're also looking that it says standby bat on the enunciator messages, so these are the enunciator messages. Now you can see the synthetic view of the ground just appeared, and it took a while to happen. So the avionics suite uses gyros to figure out which way up you are, to assist, not on top of the GPS, and also it's got GPS as well. It takes all of those systems a little while to calibrate and stabilize. So once they do, it's a bit like your mobile phone doesn't get where it is in the world for a few seconds. Obviously this is a bit older than your mobile phone, so it takes a bit longer. Okay, so once you're happy with all of that, you can go and turn the battery switch on, and you can turn the alternator switch on. Okay, so you'll notice straight away that those annunciators have gone out. We're going to start the engine, so we're going to go and turn the beacon light on. If we go and look outside and look on top of the tail, you'll see the beacon light should be flashing now, and there you can see it's flashing. So press end again to come back in. So what do we do next? I'm reading my checklist. It says press Control and 5. So we're coming back down to the mixture levers. So throttle to 1/4 of an inch in, and mixture to rich or in. Then we go back over to the pilot instrument panel, and we're going to turn the fuel pump on for between 3 and 5 seconds. So fuel pump's over here, so we turn it on, count to 1, 2, 3, turn it back off again. Then we come back into the middle of the cockpit, and we're going to put the mixture to lean, or 30% of the way in. So about 30% of the way in. And then we're going to turn the magnetos to start. So we rotate the key to hold it against start until you hear the engine fire up, and then let go. Then if you go and look, if you press Control 1 to do this, we can increase the RPM. So I'm increasing the throttle to make the RPM increase over here until we get to 1000 RPM. So I'm just gently increasing that throttle. Also, we're going to move the mixture to rich. So there we go, it's just about 1000 RPM, perfect. Okay, so while the engine is busy ticking over 1000 RPM, you're looking for the oil temperature slowly rising, the oil pressure slowly rising into the green areas. It's all looking very good. You also want to confirm the low volts annunciator has been cleared. So where it said low volts over here, and we can prove that it did, if we turn the alternator off, low volts will appear. If we turn the alternator back on, it disappears. So a lot of things have been modelled in this Cessna that, you know, are really great for you to learn procedures and to learn what happens if. Okay. So the next thing we can do is turn the avionics buses on. So we've got avionics bus 1 and 2, so we turn them both on, and in response to doing that you will immediately see the navigation screen is switched on. So if we press Control and 2, the view will move over to this side of the cockpit, and you can see it says press enter or the rightmost soft key to continue. So there's the enter key and there's the rightmost soft key, we'll use that one, and that loads the aeroplane up on the ground. So we can program a flight plan now if we want to. I'll very quickly do it. I'm not going to go into any great depth about what we're doing. So we're going to press the flight plan button. Then we're going to press the middle of the FMS knob to put the focus in here. We're going to roll the outside knob to move the cursor. We're going to roll the inside knob to set the origin airfield where we're flying from. Then we're going to click on the little keyboard, and this is a helper in the simulator that doesn't exist in the real world. And we can type in on our keyboard now the ICAO code of where we are. Now we're at Wickham. EGTB is the code for Booker Airfield or Wickham Air Park, and press enter. And then we can roll the inner knob to say what runway we're taking off from, roll the outer knob to move down through the runways. So we're going to take off runway 24 and press enter, then press enter again. Then we're going to roll the outer knob to move the cursor to the destination. We'll pretend to fly to Oxford. So we roll the inner knob to make this appear, click on the keyboard again. EGTE is Exeter, sorry, TK is Oxford, Kidlington, sorry, EGTK. Press enter, roll the inner knob to choose a runway, we'll choose runway 19, and press enter, and then enter again, and that's our very basic route. I have got a video on the channel all about the G1000 and how to do this in quite some detail. So we'll press flight plan again, and we're back out of there, and you can see the magenta line drawn between where we are and where we want to be going. Now, bear in mind this is a north-facing display on the G1000 at the moment. We can change that. If I press the menu button, you've got map settings, so press enter on map settings, roll the outer knob to move the cursor just like always, and you can see there's an orientation. We've got north up. If you press enter on that, or roll the inner knob, you get to change it, and you can say I actually want it to be heading up, and press enter. And now north is the direction the aeroplane's going. Okay, so then you can press clear, which makes the dialog go away, and we've got the map always facing where we're going. So some people like north up, some people like heading up. So it just shows you that in relation to our little aeroplane down there, we would be turning right. If we were flying there, we would be turning right to head towards Oxford. Okay, so we've programmed our flight. Next thing we do is calibrate the altimeter. So I'm going to press Control and 1 to come and look so you can see the altitude as far as the aeroplane is concerned. If we press B on the keyboard to shortcut that, it turns out the barometric pressure is 29.92. But if you look on this little diagram here, you've got course on the triangular knob here, and baro being the outside knob. That means we can tune the altimeter. Can you see it moving? So given the reading you might read from a weather forecast of the barometric pressure, and in this case it's in inches, you can tune your altimeter so it's accurate to the altitude of the airfield you're either leaving or flying to. So if you press B, it shortcuts tuning it for you. Okay. So at this point, we can taxi to the runway. So before we actually start moving, we've got a couple of things to do though. So we need to go and put the taxi lights on and put the nav lights on. And then if we sit up in the cockpit, remove the parking brake and increase the throttle gently. You don't want to taxi any more than walking pace. So a brisk walking pace should be your maximum speed for taxiing. So we're going to taxi out towards runway 24 at Wickham Air Park. We're not actually going to go as far as the runway there. We're going to pull over to one side because we're going to do a thing called a run-up test in a moment. So we're going to pull over to one side. In the real world, you would do a run-up test facing into the wind if possible. But we're just going to, for convenience purposes, pull over to this side. Be careful not to stall the engine. Put it back on the parking brake. Okay. So we've already tested the tow brakes work because we've just pulled the aeroplane to a stop, and that's fine. We can also wiggle the controls around and make sure all the controls are free moving, and we can look out of the windows, which is difficult to do in the simulator actually if you haven't got head tracking, to make sure that the control surfaces are actually moving in tandem. But you could have done this as part of your walk around as well in the real world. Okay, so what is a run-up test? If you take note of the RPM over here, so what we need to have in view is the magnetos and the RPM. So we're going to increase the RPM out to 1800. So I'm just gently taking the throttle up to 1800. A smidgen more, come on. I'm trying to make this easy so you can do the maths easily in your head when this happens. So what we're going to do now, at the moment we're using both magnetos, we're going to try switching to left and right and watch the RPM drop. And you're looking for the RPM to drop no more than 150. So we're going to go to the left magnetos, and it's dropped to 110, 120. Go to the right, and it hasn't dropped any more, so that's equal. It's a simulated aeroplane. You're not expecting there to be many variances. In the real world there might be variances. So then we'll go back to both, and it should raise back up to 1800 or thereabouts, and it has. Okay, so we've done the run-up test. So the next thing we can do is pull the throttle to idle, and we're looking for the RPM to drop to somewhere between 600 and 650 RPM. And it's gone to 630. So then we can take it back up to 1000, and we've finished testing. Okay, so then control 1, We can go and put the strobe light on and the landing light. Again, this is really predicated by us being right against the holding point over here for the runway. If you were further away, you wouldn't do those just yet. You'd wait until you're closer to the runway to turn on your strobes and landing lights. Okay, so let's go and taxi out to the runway. So increase the throttle, take the parking brake off. So I pressed F to center the screen back up there. This is the Pilot Plus version of Wickham Air Park, by the way. It's very, very good. It's a perfect place for learning. Okay, so we'll just park up here for a moment, using the toe brakes again, then put the parking brake on to do our final checks. So we're going to look and make sure that there are no warnings at the bottom right of the primary flight display. We're going to make sure that the COM radios are as we want. If you're not sure about the COM radios, if you want to play with them, you can press the knob in to flick between COM 1 and COM 2. There are two radios. You can use the outer knob to tune the integers, the inner knob to tune the decimals, and then you can flick the frequencies. So the actual frequency being used is the one on the left, and we can change the standby frequency. So you can have two frequencies on the go on each radio at any one time. Same goes for the nav radios. If you're doing radio navigation, you might want to tune in the frequencies for your route, but you may have done this a lot earlier in your planning and figuring out what frequencies you want to use. If you're using GPS, you don't need to worry about the nav radios, but you will need to look at the CDI button. So I'm just going to pop the yoke off there. The CDI button flicks through the different modes that the horizontal situation indicator will work in. And if it's in GPS mode, which we're going to use, it will be reflecting the direction of the track relative to the aeroplane. Okay, so we've done, the only thing we haven't covered is the transponder, but if you're not using air traffic control, it's not really something you're going to need to worry about. So transponder is in the soft keys at the bottom of the primary flight display. So XPDR brings you in here. If you need to change your transponder code, you can select code and select the numbers. We're not going to need to, we haven't got ATC, so yeah, unless you're on VATSIM, it's not something you're going to have to worry about ever, probably. Okay, so the final thing we do before taking off, and you can do this during the taxi if you know you're not going to be stood here talking like I am, is put the pitot heat on. So there's a pitot tube on the wing of the Cessna. That the air pressure hitting that tube is what drives the indicated airspeed and the altimeter. So if that were to freeze up in flight, then you would obviously lose vital information to the aircraft. So we need to make sure that doesn't freeze up, so you put pitot heat on. If you turn pitot heat on too early in the real world, you can cook the pitot tube. So that's why you don't turn it on too early. Okay, so make sure the mixture is rich. Put your flaps as required for takeoff. We don't need flaps to take off in a typical Cessna. Press F to line our view back up. And here we go. So throttle to full, parking brake off. You're looking for the RPM to go to at least 2300, and it's gone to 2380, which is good. We're waiting for 55 knots now on the indicated airspeed ribbon, and at 55 knots we'll start to rotate. So 55, rotate, so back pressure. Notice the nose hasn't come up straight away, and now it has. If you have got time to hold the right mouse button down and drag sideways, you get to look sideways as you climb out. Now I'm not going to do the proper pattern here, but at Wickham Air Park you do turn 230 as you climb out. So as you climb out, you're looking to turn the taxi and landing lights off when you're at 1,000 feet above ground level. There's a few things actually. Flaps would go up if we were using them 300 feet above ground level. But you're pretty much going maximum power throughout your climb, or for the initial part of your climb. And then you start leaning out slowly as you get, so it's once you get to 3,000 feet you would start leaning the engine out. I'm not going to go into too much detail about this, but you're looking for about 70 to 80 knots for your climb rate. Okay, and then throttle to, you keep the throttle at full during the climb out. You want at least above 2300 RPM. So if you are racing the throttle, you can start to pull it back a bit. And then once you get to cruise, so say we were only flying to 1500 feet, you would come back to 75% throttle. Yeah. And then you'd be looking to balance the trim at that point. And you're into normal flying technique, which I'm not going to get into in this video. So, you know, trimming the aeroplane, trimming the engine, and navigating, and communicating. So anyway, I'm going to leave it there. So that was our little kind of starter guide. So just to cover a few things off there. Your taxi and landing lights go off when you're 1,000 feet above ground level. You put the mixture to lean when you're above 3,000 feet. When you're in cruise, the throttle goes back to 75%, and then your mixture obviously is as required for the altitude you're cruising at. Hopefully you found that interesting. I'll put a link to the procedure that I've written up with all of those keyboard combinations and things in it, and directions of where to look for things are littered throughout the written instructions. So if you're just starting out in the simulator, it should prove really useful to you. It has done to me. I've ended up following the various procedures I've written in all of the airplanes I use just to avoid mistakes. Okay, I'm going to leave it there. Hopefully you enjoyed that, and I'll see you again soon.